But as our president consistently demonstrates to us, both in word and deed, he really doesn't care that much about the issues of the American people. He doesn't care about the midterms and the potential loss of Republican majorities. He's not interested in helping Republican candidates win re-election. He only cares about himself. Hello again. Welcome to The Ruthless Truth. I am your host, Truth Davis. In this forum, I share opinions, thoughts, truths on a wide variety of topics based on what I consider to be a unique life experience. And you can read more about that in the bio or the notes. My intent is to share stories and experiences and hopefully provide some guidance for you on your life and career journey. Please follow me on Instagram at TruthDavis5, subscribe to the YouTube channel Ruthless Truth, and there's also a Facebook page, Ruthless Truth. General format, I'll share some thoughts on current news items. Then I'll pick one item and go into a deeper discussion, and that'll be today's truth. Then I like to finish with an American history fun fact. Okay, welcome to the 60th episode of Ruthless Truth. Man, time is flying, and I guess because I really enjoy speaking to you each week, and I really value the comments and feedback that I receive from the podcast and my Instagram posts. And while I often remind you to review the podcast episodes, I also invite you to visit my profile at TruthDavis5 on Instagram. You'll find hundreds of short posts on a wide range of topics. Okay, I hope everyone is excited about the 3-day 4th of July weekend that's coming up. I just hope everyone is careful and safe, and please respect the heat, as much of the nation will be in the middle of a pretty oppressive heat wave. As we approach Independence Day, the U.S. Supreme Court this week wrapped up its summer session with some key decisions. First, in a 6-3 vote, the court upheld the principle of birthright citizenship, affirming the 14th Amendment of 1863. And if you recall, on his very first day of office of his second term, the president signed an executive order banning birthright citizenship as a cornerstone of his immigration policy. Now, it was immediately challenged and never went into effect, but it is now invalidated by the court's decision. In another decision, the Supreme Court ruled that states do have the right to ban transgender athletes from competing in female sports. I totally agree with this decision. I mean, if you're born as a biological male, but later transition to female, you still have a genetic and physiological advantage against other female athletes. I mean, that's not wokeness, that's just biology. But I continue to be shocked at how much attention transgender issues receive because trans people only comprise less than 1% of the U.S. population. Okay. Last week, I mentioned that the U.S. House and Senate had actually accomplished something significant by overwhelmingly passing a bipartisan bill intended to address housing affordability. I also said that it was a bill that the president was eager to sign. And on that note, I was sorely mistaken. Yeah, they scheduled a grand signing ceremony adorned with American flags where key members of Congress would stand behind the president as he signed the bill into law. But approximately an hour before the scheduled signing, the president announced on social media that he was canceling the signing of the housing bill. He said he wouldn't sign the bill until Congress passed his cherished Save America Act, which looks to make voting more difficult. Republicans were fuming, embarrassed, blindsided. They were looking forward to campaigning on the bill as evidence that they were addressing the issues that mattered most to the American people. You know, doing their jobs. But the president said the housing bill was, quote, unimportant compared to the SAVE Act. And he has been told multiple times that the SAVE Act has no chance of passing because there's not enough support of it, even among Republicans. But as our president consistently demonstrates to us, both in word and deed, he really doesn't care that much about the issues of the American people. He doesn't care about the midterms and the potential loss of Republican majorities. He's not interested in helping Republican candidates win re-election. He only cares about himself. Fortunately, even without his signature, the housing bill will become law after 10 days. Okay. Also, as predicted here, Supergirl did not fare well at the box office last weekend, only earning $38 million in the U.S., which is even worse than I and other skeptics expected. Reviews were widely mixed, with some people saying it was really good and others saying it was trash and everything in between. I didn't see it, but I will. But I told you that one factor would be men rejecting a female hero. But apparently another criticism was that she wasn't hot enough or sexualized enough. Well, the character wasn't written to be sexy. She was intended to be tough and somewhat tortured and complicated. I guess some viewers don't want to see that type of depth in a female character. Just be pretty and don't cause too much trouble. That's disappointing. Okay, let's get to today's truth. Today's truth. In last week's episode, I discussed the challenges facing millennials and Gen Z when it comes to making their first home purchase, and that previous generations did not have to deal with as much as do today's young buyers. Well, I've received mixed comments. I'd say the majority of responders agree with my take, especially, not surprisingly, younger listeners. However, there were some older people pushing back, saying that the younger generations aren't as willing to make the sacrifices that they made, such as moving to less than ideal cities to pursue job opportunities, or delaying lifestyle fun, such as traveling and eating out. The point being, you can't have it all. Well, this inspired me to today's truth. You know, you really can't have it all, at least not at the same time. Life is about priorities, choices, and trade-offs. And this applies to career, health, relationships, and many other aspects of your life. So let's take a closer look at a few of these life factors. Okay, first up, career. In response to last week's discussion on housing, a frequent question was, if young people can't afford a house where they are, why don't they just move to a more affordable city? Is it that they don't want to give up their big city lifestyle or network of friends and family? Well, that could be a factor, but that is an oversimplification of the issue. Yes, there's no question. Cost of living expenses will be significantly lower if someone moves from a large metro like New York, LA, or San Francisco to a more mid-sized metro like Dallas, Nashville, or Charlotte. Everything is more affordable. But again, there are trade-offs. There may be fewer job opportunities in the smaller markets, as many high-paying corporate jobs remain centered in major metropolitan areas. Still, it's just simple math that more job opportunities are available to you if you expand your search to include multiple cities. You know, I've mentioned many times that I've been a resident of 8 different states. And when people ask why, I simply said, I went to where the opportunity was. Of course, I would have loved to spend my entire career in Atlanta and not have relocated my family so often. But we went to where the jobs were. And I believe living in a wide range of communities broadened my perspective and actually strengthened coping skills. But let me emphasize that moving to another city is a huge decision. If you're considering it, make sure you clearly identify all the potential issues and trade-offs and evaluate the merits. While you may gain purchasing power, you may lose amenities, culture, other quality of life aspects. It's well documented that many Californians who moved to Texas for affordability actually regret their decision. Yeah, costs are lower and there's no state income tax, but they also experience the climate shock of hot summers and a landlocked location. Also, the political environment is vastly different, as Texas is a conservative state with policy and cultural norms that proved a difficult adjustment for those who previously lived in a more liberal environment. Look, I hear it all the time from younger Americans. My goal is to have a job I enjoy, making good money, living in a great city, close to friends and family. Well, of course, who wouldn't want that? But the fact is, many people can't get all of that at once. So some choices will need to be made. If location is the most important thing to you, then you might have to accept a step back or to the side for your career trajectory. The key is prioritizing what matters to you most, then making decisions accordingly. Okay, another area where you can't have it all: relationship prospects. In episode 19 of The Ruthless Truth, I conduct a lengthy discussion on the current dating crisis in the United States. I actually just re-listened to it, and if I say so myself, it is one of my better episodes. So if you're in the dating pool today, I encourage you to give it a listen. Okay, back to the discussion today. A recent analysis of dating sites reveals that the majority of women, a large majority of women, are looking for a man who is at least 6 feet tall. Well, the reality is that only 14% of the men in the United States are 6 feet or taller. And that's all men. So when you subtract the men who are married, gay, or already in a relationship, that pool gets even smaller. Now, it's understandable that women would prefer a height gap. And that's usually the case if 90% of couples consist of a taller man and a shorter woman. But please don't place this arbitrary limitation on your chances. Second, you need to be realistic about your own marketplace value and what are your realistic prospective partners. You know, many average-looking people reject interest from other average-looking people, holding out for the possibility of connecting with a more attractive partner. Well, here's an interesting fun fact for you to consider. Attractive individuals often face lower long-term marriage rates because their desirability creates a grass is greener mentality. They have high confidence in their dating prospects, making them less willing to overlook minor relationship flaws or commit to the difficult work required to sustain long-term marriages. Look, most people are average looking. That's why it's called average. But productive relationships are usually built on more than just looks. So just keep it in perspective. My final life factor where you can't have it all: body weight and fitness. Okay, most people would prefer to be at a healthy weight and maintain a decent level of fitness. In fact, approximately 15% of Americans would like to weigh less. And candidly, I expected that number to be higher. But of those who would like to be smaller, less than half of them are actively doing anything about it. Now, I recognize it's not a fair playing field. Some people are genetically predisposed to be thin and really don't have to work much to maintain a healthy weight. And then there are others who lost the genetic lottery and have a higher propensity to gain weight while facing serious body resistance to losing weight. But unfortunately, that's just the way it is. So regardless of how you fared, for most people, maintaining or losing weight involves focus, choices, and priorities. There have been many studies that reviewed and analyzed the habits of people who have healthy weights and are able to maintain it. And here is just an overall conclusion. Again, you can't have it all. These people make disciplined and conscious choices. Let's just look at a few of them. First, they maintain a consistent eating routine. They generally eat about the same time every day, and their diet's kind of boring. Healthy diets consist of a lot of lean proteins like chicken and fish, healthy carbs and vegetables, low sugar, and select beverages. And on the point of beverages, I have a message directed just to my Black listeners. Juice is not healthy. Oh, black people love juice. Orange juice, cranberry juice, pineapple juice, cherry juice, and more. But not only do they drink it standalone, but they often use it as a mixer for alcoholic beverages, compounding the problem. Juice is just liquid sugar. Please limit your quantities. And also the same for soda. I haven't had a soda in 18 years. Again, it's just liquid soda. And on a related point, alcohol, that's a weight loss killer. Not only does it pack a lot of empty calories, making it difficult to achieve the calorie deficit required for weight loss, but it pauses the body's ability to burn fat and it disrupts sleep patterns. Now, by no means am I recommending eliminating alcohol. Just try to moderate your drinking. One popular approach is to eliminate weekday drinking. Just this one change over time could deliver noticeable results. Okay, another one, limit eating out and food delivery. You will almost always consume more calories eating out than eating in. And I know this is a tough one because personally, I love eating out. But eating out frequently will make it much harder to keep the weight off. And the final tip is that you need to consistently move. Notice I didn't say exercise. Now, don't get me wrong. Consistently going to the gym and constantly engaging in cardio and resistance training will greatly improve your weight loss results. But minimally, avoid being sedentary all day. Get up, walk around, try to consistently get in 8,000 steps a day. And last but definitely not least, please recognize that all of this gets harder as you get older. Man, when I was in my 20s, I could think about losing weight and see pounds come off. But once you reach the age of 35, your body will become more and more resistant to your weight loss efforts. So as you get older, just realize you will constantly need to make adjustments to diet, fitness, lifestyle to maintain healthy weight levels for life. So to summarize, in many aspects of your life, you just can't have it all, at least not at once. Life is about priorities, choices, and trade-offs. But only you know what is most important to you. So the key is to take time, conduct self-inventory, and then decide what matters most to you, whether it is career, family, money, or lifestyle. But once you're clear on what it is you really want, then you can make life decisions accordingly. Okay, let's get to today's American History Fun Fact. Today's American History Fun Fact. Okay, this week we celebrate the 250th birthday of the United States. We celebrate and commemorate July 4th, 1776, because that is the day America declared its independence from Great Britain. Now, I've always had mixed feelings about Independence Day, so I generally just don't comment on it. But given the historical significance of 250 years, it does deserve some attention. So in today's American History Fact, I'm going to tell some truths about America's Independence Day, and I'm quite certain that many of you will learn things you never before knew. Okay, let's start with the basics. First of all, the decision and vote to declare independence did not occur on July 4th. Officially, the Continental Congress declared its freedom from Great Britain on July 2nd, 1776, when it voted to approve a resolution submitted by Delegate Richard Henry Lee of Virginia, declaring, and I quote, that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, end quote. Hell, John Adams expected July 2nd to be the day of celebration for generations to come. But after voting on independence on July 2nd, the Continental Congress then needed a document explaining the move to the public. Now, document had been worked on for months and it had been proposed in a draft form. And then it took 2 days for the Congress to agree on the edits, thus July 4th. Now, once the final version was approved, Congress sent it to a printer for copies. Of the 200 copies originally printed, only 26 remain today. Then, on August 2nd, 1776, the Congress reconvened in Philadelphia and 50 of the 56 delegates actually signed the document, with the remaining few signing at various times during the year. Okay, next point. The signing of the Declaration of Independence did not mark the beginning of the American Revolution. I mean, by the time the Declaration of Independence was adopted in July 1776, the 13 colonies in Great Britain had been at war for over a year. Relations had been deteriorating between the colonies and the mother country since 1763. The colonies had become increasingly agitated by oppressive and multiple taxes imposed on them. There was the Stamp Act of 1765, intended to pay for British military troops stationed in the American colonies after the French and Indian War. But the colonists had never feared a French invasion to begin with, and they contended they had already paid their share of the war expenses. And on a side note, I think this is one of the most poorly named wars because it wasn't a battle of the French versus the Indians. It was a war fought by the French with the Indians against Great Britain. Then there was the Tea Act of 1773, where Great Britain pursued a bailout of the East India Tea Company by imposing heavy taxes on the purchase of tea by the colonies. This led to the Boston Tea Party, where on December 16th, 1773, several insurgent colonists disguised as Native Americans boarded English ships and dumped hundreds of chests of tea into Boston Harbor. Now, while the Tea Party was obviously a precursor to the American Revolution, it has an additional legacy in American history. Because following the Boston Tea Party, many Americans considered drinking tea as unpatriotic. Tea drinking declined during and after the Revolution, resulting in a shift to coffee as the preferred hot drink. And it has been that way ever since. Okay, once the Declaration was published, it was shared, printed, and distributed all over the world. But in the United States, the document received little attention for quite a few years. It was barely mentioned during subsequent Independence Day celebrations, was rarely mentioned during the debates about the United States Constitution, and its language was not incorporated into that document. Okay, I don't know if you've read it, but the Declaration of Independence is actually a very well-written, provocative, and compelling document. I always say words matter, okay? Which actually gets to my mixed feelings about the document. Because the most often quoted passage is, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Those are nice words. But at the time they were printed, there were approximately 500,000 slaves held in the 13 colonies, representing about a fifth of the total population. And Native Americans were also facing oppression. So I guess it wasn't all men. Thomas Jefferson had actually included a paragraph in his initial rough draft of the Declaration, vigorously condemning the evil of the slave trade and condemning King George III for forcing it onto the colonies. But this was deleted from the final version. On July 5th, 1852, Frederick Douglass was invited to speak at an Independence Day celebration in Rochester, New York. Now, it's a fairly long speech, but it is one of my all-time favorites. He provides global historical perspective on religion, liberty, and of course, the United States. But at one point, he provocatively asks, "What to the American slave is your 4th of July?" I answer, "A day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham." End quote. Now, from there, he goes on for several minutes detailing the breadth and depth of the hypocrisy. But fortunately, as a nation, we have evolved and progressed to the point that civil and human rights really do apply to all men in this country. We can all celebrate and hold national pride for our home country. And despite the accusations for some on the right, I don't believe that acknowledging historical accuracy is equivalent to hating America. I mean, you can love someone but still be aware of their flaws and faults. I can't think of anyone in my life that I 100% agree with on everything, whether it be teacher, pastor, friend, colleague, parent, child, or spouse. So I encourage all of you to celebrate America's birthday. Enjoy your fireworks, picnics, concerts, and parades. I'm a staunch believer in celebrating history. I just ask that we acknowledge all history and not just pick and choose the parts we like and that makes us feel good. Okay, that's all I have for you today on The Ruthless Truth. Thank you so much for listening. Again, follow me on Instagram at TruthDavis5. Subscribe to the YouTube channel Ruthless Truth. And there's also a Facebook page, Ruthless Truth. Again, I encourage you to review and listen to past episodes. I'm sure there is something you will find of interest and help to you. Again, happy 4th of July, and I will speak to all of you again soon.